The morning began like every other, with the same creak of the floorboards beneath Eli Thornton's boots and the faint whinny of horses out in the corral. The ranch still slept under a pale orange sky, the world caught between night and day, and the air smelled of dust and mesquite. Eli poured himself a cup of coffee, black and bitter, then leaned against the doorframe to watch the horizon. Every day started this way, quiet and predictable. 3 times a day he would ride the same stretch of land, checking fences, feeding stock, and ensuring no coyotes or rustlers had crossed into his territory. He'd built a life on repetition and silence, the kind of peace a man earns after losing too much. But that morning, something felt off. The wind was wrong. It carried an acrid, heavy scent that made the back of his throat sting. He squinted into the distance toward the south ridge, where a faint smudge of smoke drifted upward, dark and curling. Smoke wasn't uncommon out here, not in the dry months, but this was too much, too thick, too steady. It wasn't a brush fire. It was controlled, deliberate. Someone was burning something. Eli set his coffee down and moved fast, his steps steady despite the dread gathering in his gut. He saddled Dusty, his old bay mare, who stamped and snorted, restless from the same tension that hung in the air. As he mounted, the sun broke the horizon, painting the plains in gold and blood red. He spurred the horse forward, galloping over the hills, wind whipping through his hair, dust rising behind him like smoke of his own making. As he neared the creek, the smell grew stronger, burnt wood, charred earth, and something else that made his stomach twist. He crested the final hill and froze. Below him lay the Cherokee settlement, or what was left of it. The small cluster of huts and smokehouses that had stood peacefully for years now burned like a circle of hell. Fire devoured rooftops, children screamed, women ran clutching what they could save, and soldiers in faded blue coats moved through the chaos like reapers. Eli's breath caught. Those were the same people who had once saved him. Years ago, fever had struck him down during a cattle drive. He'd collapsed near that same creek, shaking and delirious. It had been the tribe's medicine woman, gray-haired and steady-handed, who had brought him back with her herbs and strange prayers. He'd never forgotten her kindness or the way she'd refused payment. She'd simply said that the land took care of its own. Now soldiers were burning her home to the ground. Eli urged Dusty forward, riding hard into the settlement. A young boy darted across the path, chased by a soldier with a torch. Eli grabbed the man by the collar as he rode past, hauling him off his feet and slamming him into the dirt. The torch rolled away, sputtering. The soldier groaned, dazed, but Eli didn't stop. He jumped down, eyes blazing. The other soldiers turned toward him. Their leader, a thick-shouldered sergeant with the scar slicing across his cheek, stepped forward, rifle slung lazily over one arm. His smirk carried the arrogance of men who thought they were untouchable. "Best keep riding, rancher," the sergeant drawled. "This land's been claimed for settlement. Orders from Fort Mason." Eli ignored him, his gaze fixed on the largest hut at the center of the fire. Through the smoke and flicker of flames, he saw her, the medicine woman, half collapsed, trying to drag herself away from the heat. His heart slammed against his ribs. Without a word, he ran straight for her, shielding his face from the smoke with his arm. The soldiers shouted behind him, but he didn't care. The fire roared in his ears, a living beast trying to swallow everything. His coat caught a spark, the edge of his sleeve burned, but he pushed through until he reached her. She was light in his arms, her breath shallow, her eyes glazed from the smoke. He carried her out, stumbling into the open air, lungs screaming for clean oxygen. He laid her on the ground beside the creek, patting out the flames on his coat before looking up at the soldiers. His voice was rough but steady. "Put the fires out, now." The sergeant laughed, as did a few others. They looked at the lone rancher standing there, covered in soot, with nothing but a half-burnt shirt and a revolver at his hip. They saw one man and the remains of a tribe they thought beneath the law. "You got no say here, cowboy," the sergeant said. "You best ride home before you make this your funeral." Eli took a step closer, hand brushing the handle of his Colt. "I owe her my life," he said, voice low and cold. "You'll stop this, or you'll answer to me." The sergeant's smile faded. He nodded to one of his men. The soldier lifted his rifle, but Eli was already moving. In the blink of an eye, his Colt was out, the barrel steady. The crack of gunfire split the air. The soldier dropped before he could aim. Another went down a heartbeat later, clutching his shoulder. Dusty reared, neighing loud enough to wake the hills. The remaining soldiers hesitated. They hadn't expected a rancher to fight back, let alone shoot straight. Eli didn't move from his spot. His revolver stayed trained on the sergeant. The flames roared around them, painting everything in a violent glow. "Go on," Eli said, voice trembling from the adrenaline. "Tell your men to stand down." The sergeant's jaw tightened. "You really want to die for them savages?" Eli's eyes were steel, not die. "Live right." The words hung in the air, heavy as the smoke. The sergeant raised his rifle. Time slowed. The crack of a shot echoed across the valley, and for a second, the world stopped breathing. Then the sergeant stumbled backward, disbelief frozen on his face before he fell to the dirt. His rifle clattered beside him. The others ran. They vanished into the smoke, leaving behind their torches, their cruelty, and the silence that came after violence. Eli lowered his gun, chest heaving, the tremor in his hands betraying what he felt inside. He turned back to the creek, to the medicine woman lying there. Her eyes fluttered open. She touched his burned hand, her skin cool against his. She murmured something in her native tongue, words Eli didn't understand, but he knew they weren't curses. They were blessings, gratitude, a promise that this moment meant something more than either of them could see. Behind them, the rest of the tribe gathered, silent and grief-stricken. Their homes were gone, but their spirits stood unbroken. The old woman's son stepped forward, nodding once to Eli, a look of solemn respect in his eyes. He didn't need to speak. The meaning was clear. Eli wasn't just an outsider anymore. He was part of their story now. As the fires burned themselves to ash, the sun climbed higher, throwing light on what had been lost. Eli stood for a long time, watching the smoke drift away into the blue. The gun felt heavy in his hand. He holstered it, mounted Dusty, and looked down one last time at the settlement. The old woman watched him go, her eyes following until he disappeared over the hill. He rode home in silence, the weight of what he'd done pressing on him like a second shadow. The government would hear about it. The army would call him a traitor. But deep down he didn't care. Some things were worth the risk. Some debts could never be repaid, only honored. That night, as darkness settled over the plains, Eli sat on his porch, the same spot where every morning began. The stars looked different somehow, clearer, closer. The wind carried faint echoes of drum beats and songs from the creek, the sound of a people still alive. He knew the world wouldn't remember his name. History rarely remembered men like him, but maybe, just maybe, it would remember what he'd done. He still rode the same trail 3 times a day after that, out of habit more than necessity. But now, each time he passed the creek, he'd stop for a while, listening to the wind rustle through the grass, watching the land he'd once taken for granted. Every hoofbeat seemed to whisper back to him, a reminder that some days change everything, not with words or glory, but with fire, courage, and a single choice made when no one else would. And so the legend of the rancher who defied soldiers for a burned village grew. People said the plains themselves changed after that day, that the grass grew greener near the creek where the fires had been, that the wind always carried the faint scent of sage and smoke. Some swore the land never forgot what Eli Thornton had done, because history, out here in the wild, wasn't written in books. It was written in the dust, the blood, and the hearts of those who chose to stand when others turned away.